up next on The Real Story, a detective still haunted by the mass murder case he broke a decade ago.
And was there a gang connection behind the Los Angeles riots? Our Capitol Insider has the story.
Good evening and welcome to The Real Story. I'm Cassandra Clayton.
And I'm Boyd Mattson. Tonight on our video magazine, we'll find out how psychics help find one of this country's most horrible mass murderers on the show. But first, there was a case that shocked the nation. 33 young men and boys killed by a man who disguised his perversion with a clown face. In tonight's cover story, Scott Cohn reports from our Chicago bureau on the unusual way the case was solved and the detective still haunted by it.
Well, Boyd, the case of John Wayne Gacy helped define the term serial killer and define it in brutal terms. Gacy used his contracting business to lure boys into a trap of sexual assault and brutal murder. It happened in 1978, but interest in the case and what it took to solve it remains high, perhaps to be heightened even more by a syndicated miniseries to be aired this month. Tonight, the real story of what it took to catch a killer. Somerdale Avenue, just outside Chicago, is a quiet residential street, but just being here gives Joe Kozenczak the willies.
It's difficult to deal with in some respects because you feel overwhelmed in a sense to what transpired in this investigation. And
this is where Kozenczak helped uncover one of the crimes of the century.
Investigators have found 9 bodies in 3 days of searching through John Gacy's suburban Chicago home. They expect to find at least 4 more bodies each day for the rest of the week.
John Wayne Gacy is charged with more murders than any other one person in American history. 33.
Police found 29 bodies buried in shallow graves under his home and near it. Police also found 4 bodies in nearby streams.
It will take weeks to measure the enormity of this crime, and even longer to identify all of its victims.
John Wayne Gacy lived on Somerdale Avenue, and he seemed to be a pillar of his neighborhood, politically connected, a modestly successful contractor who dressed as a clown every so often to entertain kids. Little did anyone know that under the grease paint was a cold-blooded killer.
He's a sexual psychopath. He likes fear. He likes to instill fear in his victims.
But proving that took some heavy-duty police work, a little luck, and a couple of psychics. The stuff detective stories are made of. This detective story is now a 4-hour miniseries. Brian Dennehy plays the role of the man convicted of more murders than anyone in history.
Oh, Mr. Policeman, don't you know a clown can get away with murder?
And Canadian actor Michael Riley plays Gacy's nemesis, Detective Joe Kozenczak.
We knew the subject matter, and it was very macabre at times, and you couldn't spend a lot of time on that set without feeling that.
Equally hard for Joe Kozenczak, who was a consultant on the project and had to relive the case yet again.
I mean, they had the attic restructured, rebuilt, and they had the crawl space rebuilt. It was like...
That had been weird.
Yeah, that was really weird because it was so detailed, they worked off of photographs. And it was so detailed, it was really kind of eerie. Yeah.
Does it feel like it was yesterday?
Yes. Yeah, it does.
The miniseries may be about a mass murder, but the producers pride themselves on not showing a single drop of blood, nor virtually any violence during the entire 4 hours. Instead, this is supposed to be a psychological thriller.
Checking up on me or them?
Should I be checking up on you, Mr. Gacy?
It was a psychological thriller in real life for Joe Kozenczak and his team of detectives in the Chicago suburb of Des Plaines. And it began almost by accident, a report of a missing teenage boy in the suburb. Now, even back then, in 1978, reports of missing teens were all too common, almost routine. But to Joe Kozenczak, something was different about this one. Some things just didn't add up.
Background information in doing juvenile history checks on this young man showed that he was never involved with the police in any format. He was never reported as a runaway.
The missing boy was Robert Piest, 15 years old, the same age as Kozenczak's son, and a student at the same high school.
The feelings of stepping out of your squad and actually telling yourself that you were looking for a victim in a case like this was just extremely upsetting, in a sense of thinking that someone as young as your son could be out in the woods someplace and have fallen prey to a killer such as Gacy.
And again, that was the kind of thing that drove you.
Yes, yeah. That was the whole basis, in the sense of spurring you on to go forward with this thing.
Piest was last seen at the drugstore where he had worked. He'd stepped outside to see a contractor, John Gacy, about a summer job. So Kozenczak and company headed to Summerdale Avenue, to Gacy's house.
The door was to my left. I just, out of the peripheral view of my vision, I could see a face in the window, just very briefly. And I tapped Jimmy on the elbow. I said, "See that?" And he turned, and by then the face was gone.
When the officers got inside to talk to Gacy, things got even stranger.
He denied talking to the boy, and he also stated that he had a death in the family, and he had to help his mother make funeral arrangements, and he was waiting for his mother to call. And I told him to get on the phone and expedite things and call the mother. And then when you get completed with your call, you can come with us. And he just turned in disgust and said, you don't have any respect for the dead, do you? And I said, "I'm not doing it to give you a hard time over your uncle's death. I just," not realizing that we were standing on top of 27 bodies.
The seeds of suspicion had been planted, but the crime was far from solved. Kozenczak learned that Gacy had been jailed in Iowa for sodomy involving teenage boys. But that didn't prove anything, and even if Robert Piest was murdered, where was the body? That's where the psychics come in. There were two in the real-life case, combined into one role in the movie by Margot Kidder.
There could be others. He's been getting away with this for a long, long time.
It was then that Kozenczak and company began to understand the extent of what they were dealing with. Not one missing boy, but many. Slowly, the clues began coming together.
There were pieces of jewelry, a high school ring that came from the same high school that the missing boy was from, but it wasn't his ring.
It was enough to get a second search warrant for Gacy's house to uncover everyone's worst nightmare. There were 27 bodies buried in Gacy's crawl space, carried out in a gruesome procession in the December chill. But for Joe Kozenczak, the case still wasn't cracked.
It became evident to me that I still had not found Robert Piest.
Gacy, now in custody, confessed that Piest's body was one of several he had dumped in the river, in a spot remarkably similar to one the psychics described. John Wayne Gacy pleaded insanity, but was convicted of 33 murders and is on death row. But even now, 14 years after the fact, Joe Kozenczak wonders if there isn't more to uncover, maybe more victims. And here's why. Kozenczak claims that a map was found in Gacy's home at the time that the murders were solved, a map with pins in it. Now, it may seem to a cynic like hype for the upcoming miniseries, but Kozenczak says it is hard to believe that Gacy, who is known to travel, didn't commit murders elsewhere. Boyd?
Well, Scott, why wasn't the map checked out at the time of Gacy's arrest, since that was the moment everybody thought he had killed a lot of people?
Well, Kozenczak claims that at the time, people didn't understand the term serial killer. It was just being coined, and in fact was almost coined by this very case. So they didn't look at it. They had found so many missing victims that they just kind of set it aside, and it's been set aside ever since.
Kozenczak seems very bothered and haunted by this case, as you can understand. But why is he cooperating with this miniseries, which brings it all back fresh to him?
Well, he claims that it's kind of therapeutic to talk about it. It has been for a number of years. He's been very much in the forefront on the speaking circuit. He's written a book, and now this miniseries. Of course, it is all somewhat lucrative for him, but he does feel a sense of responsibility to try and prevent anything like this from happening again, and maybe make people aware that there are monsters like John Wayne Gacy out there.
All right, Scott, thank you very much for that story.